An intruder breaks into an apartment and with a single bullet shoots a 19-year-old, killing her. But 2 years later, no arrest in the case. On June 4th of 2022, 19-year-old Rachel Hansen was just a week shy of her 20th birthday. But tragically, she never had a chance to celebrate her birthday. She was sleeping inside her Gilbert, Arizona apartment when an intruder broke in and shot her. Rachel fought hard for her survival. She dialed 911 to let authorities know she had been shot by an unknown person around 2 a.m. When officers arrived, they found Hansen with one gunshot wound. She was rushed to the hospital, but she passed away. After her death, a lot of questions were left unanswered, including who was the intruder and why did this person shoot Rachel? 2 years have gone by since Rachel's horrific death, but newly released 911 transcripts are revealing more chilling details on Rachel's final moments before she was killed. When Rachel first called 911 to report she had been shot, she reportedly said, "I've been shot. Someone broke in and shot me." The 19-year-old then gave the dispatcher her address before saying, "Please hurry, please hurry." Then she told them, I'm bleeding. The dispatcher reportedly urged the teen to stay on the phone and asked Rachel, "Do you have any kind of clean cloth there that you can apply pressure to it? Is there anybody there with you?" Rachel told the dispatcher she was alone and whoever broke in and shot her had left. The dispatcher asked, "Are you close to any kind of cloth or shirt or a towel that you can use?" And Rachel responded, "No." The dispatcher then asked, "There's nothing near you? Rachel, I need you to talk to me, okay?" Rachel said, "I can't." A lot of our stories are very tough to tell, but what keeps us bringing you these stories is in part due to our sponsors. And I want to just take a moment to thank one of our wonderful sponsors, and that's City Lips. As someone whose work is always on camera, I'm constantly having to touch up my makeup, especially reapply my lip gloss over and over again. And I really appreciate a glossy and a plumpy look. So I turned to City Lips. City Lips is an all-in-one solution for dry lips, fine lines and wrinkles, and straw lines. It's formulated with clinically and tested ingredients like hyaluronic acid for that perfect plumpy pout. And it's not just me who loves City Lips. Millions of women have tried them and the tubes are flying off the shelves. Snag one before it's too late and check out City Lips by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to citybeauty.com/LCnews. Use the code LAW15 for 15% off. According to AZ Family, about 3 minutes later, the Gilbert Police Department and the Gilbert Fire Department said they were having trouble mapping out her address before firefighters got it on the map. Then nearly 5 minutes later, firefighters and police arrived on scene. Her mother, Kim, previously told AZ Family she believed her daughter was targeted. But while the case has gone cold, her mother is now turning to a private investigator and hopes to get more answers. And here's what else we know about Rachel Hansen. Her mother reportedly fostered over 100 children over the years, and Rachel was one of 9 she adopted. She reportedly had a passion for saving animals. In her honor, Rachel's family started Rachel's Rescue to take in animals and care for them to give them a forever home. And while at this time they await for more information that could lead to catching their daughter's killer, Rachel's family reportedly remains hopeful someone will come forward with information. I'm joined now by international cold case and homicide investigator Joe Kennedy to break down this case with me today. Now, Joe, thank you so much for joining me. Rachel Hansen was shot by an intruder inside her own apartment 2 years ago, but still no arrests in this case. What are your thoughts, and are you surprised an arrest hasn't been made?
No, I'm not. I mean, this is a case that would be, a tough case to investigate. First of all, we have to ask, how did this suspect gain entrance to the apartment, right? And that is one of the key questions. And is there signs of forced entry? Is there signs of a struggle? These kind of things. And have any persons of interest surfaced, in the initial investigation or the early investigation?
And how important are these newly released transcripts, which reveal Rachel was fighting for her life? She called 911. She was able to speak with the dispatcher. She told the dispatcher someone broke in. What are your thoughts about the 911 calls and the newly released transcripts that just came out?
Well, the 911 call, those are very important for us as homicide investigators. We always want to evaluate them. They reveal clues, some behavioral clues, about what's going on at a scene. And what is the caller trying to convey. And as you'll hear here, it certainly sounds like, that she's in distress, right? Or she's under duress. She says she's bleeding. She says she's been shot. It's interesting that she says that the individual broke into her house, right? So, what we should be seeing is some signs of forced entry, or maybe they use some type of ruse or con or trick to gain access to her apartment.
And as far as the investigation goes into the intruder and her murder, where do you think that the evidence may have lacked in this case? I know you had mentioned, the signs of whether or not there were signs of forced entry, but what other evidence do you think is lacking in the case to catch this killer?
Well, Elizabeth, there's only three ways to solve a murder, right? We have to have physical evidence like DNA, fingerprints. Eyewitnesses is the second way we solve them, right? We've got a neighborhood. It's a gated community, if I understand correctly. But then lastly, we have to get the suspect to confess to us, right? So it's one of those three things. Only 15% of murders are solved with physical evidence. About 35% are solved with witnesses. And that leaves half of murder cases we have to actually get the suspect to confess to us if we're going to solve that case.
And I thought it was interesting that, Rachel was killed in 2022, a time where we have surveillance footage, we have ring camera videos, and we have so much more as well too, but still no suspects, no descriptions. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, we don't, from what's been released to the media, the police could very well have a suspect, right? They could have a prime suspect. There could be persons of interest. We just don't know at this point from the information that's been released. But I will tell you, that in that particular part of Arizona, Gilbert, it's a metropolitan area. I'm sure they have very capable detectives. And so one of the things that hopefully was done in the initial investigation was, they saturated that neighborhood and tried to reveal, who had Ring doorbell cameras, who had home security systems, these kind of things, because that's always a focus of our investigative activities when we're looking at a murder.
And in cases like this, in cold cases specifically, and say you're investigating it, what are the first things that you are going to be looking for in this type of case?
Yeah, so we're going to go right back to the ground zero. We are going to start over, right? And we're going to meticulously go through this case. What we talk about is we're going to have keen observation. We're looking for potential things that may have been overlooked, clues that maybe weren't put together, some dots that maybe weren't connected, and then from that keen observation, we're going to start compiling our own meticulous documentation, right? So that hey, what fits, what doesn't fit, and we're going to do many of the same things that a homicide detective would do. We're going to focus on three groups of people: family and friends, coworkers and neighbors, associates and acquaintances. That's typically going to hopefully lead us to the perpetrator.
And do you think by chance, and obviously we don't know this at all, but do you think that there is this slight chance that maybe Rachel knew her killer? Or do you or do you believe kind of what we've been seeing in reports as far as this being someone unknown to her, this being an intruder who may have had a chance opportunity to try to break into her apartment? What are your thoughts?
Well, I will say this, that when we're looking at any kind of murder, regardless of the situation, 9 out of 10 murders, there's a personal relationship, right? There's a prior relationship that's in existence. So, if this is truly a stranger on stranger crime, it is in the smaller, it's in the minority of cases that we get or we look at. So, a couple of things come to mind. She's a young lady, right? If I understand correctly, she's in training horses, right? And so you got to, one thing is so important with any murder case is victimology. And so what we want to do is we want to look, where is she at 36, 48 hours before the murder? And where would she have been had she not been killed 36 or 48 hours after the murder, right? Sometimes the future or a futuristic event actually results in someone's demise. So those are some other key areas that we would want to be focusing on.
These a lot of these murders are very shocking to hear, and we cover a lot of these types of cases here at Law and Crime, and I can't even imagine what this does to a family. As far as what this does to a family and them not being able to come to terms as far as closure goes, talk to me a little bit about your experience speaking to family members who just want to know what happened to their loved ones.
Elizabeth, having worked with hundreds of families, I can tell you this, that they never get closure, right? If we're lucky enough to solve the case, we might give them some resolution, but they never fully get closure, right? That person's not coming back. They're not going to, be in their presence again. And so it's very difficult on families, and they constantly relive it, right? With anniversary dates. And, you'll see, I've seen dramatic effects on families. They can't sleep, they can't eat. It really upends their, and there's upheaval in their lives just to, for daily existence and to carry out their normal daily functions.
And Rachel's family has reportedly hired a private investigator. Do you think that'll help crack this case?
Well, I don't know the background of this private investigator. Sometimes private investigators can add value to investigations. Sometimes, they can interfere with official police investigations. So I don't know where he particularly would fall out in the spectrum. But the more eyes you have looking on a case, the better, right? And we have to remember this, Elizabeth, that individuals don't solve murders; teams solve murders.
Do you believe that this case could eventually get solved?
Oh, absolutely. And I want you to think about this. I mean, we have to ask who wanted her dead, right? And why did she die on this particular date at this particular time? But yes, absolutely. You'll find that in the vast majority of cold cases, believe it or not, the suspect tells someone they did it, and we just have to track down that person. Also, when suspects commit murder, so many murders are not planned, right? Maybe this was a planned break in or a planned robbery that turned into a murder. And often that's what is the case. And that often happens based on a victim's response. She fought back, she tried to flee. Who knows what might have unfolded there. But they always tell somebody, right? Because they can't cope with it. That's the biggest thing with folks that commit murder. They don't realize what an impact it has on them, and so you'll almost instantaneously start watching their lives deteriorate. They turn to alcohol, drugs. They can't keep a job. They can't stay in the same residence. So these are some telltale signs that the cold case investigators should be looking for in this case and would be looking for in this case.
Do you have any type of thoughts on the fact that going back to the stranger on stranger aspect, that theory there? Do you have any thoughts about Rachel only being shot once with one single gunshot wound? Does that stand out to you at all?
Well, a single gunshot wound, and we don't know where she was shot at, but it's actually hard to kill somebody with a single gunshot. Sometimes we have to have a good shot to get a fatal wound. So, how did the perpetrator, was he aware of that? That he was in fact trying to kill her. My guess is, and my gut feeling on this is, it was not a planned murder. What this is a planned break-in. It's a planned robbery, and she fought back. She confronted them, and then when she did, the perpetrator ended up shooting her. That is what it would tell me from the single gunshot wound. And obviously, I could be dead wrong on this, but that's my experience of where I would, at least the road I would be starting to travel.
As far as the information that we know so far about the perpetrator, which is very limited, but is there any type of, I guess, we talked about victimology, but is there any type of, I guess, analysis of the perpetrator that you believe kind of stands out that could kind of help, again, crack this case?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want you to think about two things. First of all, Elizabeth, all crimes are geographic. I feel very comfortable that the perpetrator either lives, works, or plays in very close proximity to her apartment. The second thing is that the criminals, when they commit crimes, right, they leave physical evidence like DNA or fingerprints. They also deposit their personality. And there's many things that we can read at a crime scene. The control of the victim, right? What did the offender do to control the victim's movement and actions? We can also see anger at a crime scene, right? Typically, when you see anger, there's an escalation of assaultive behavior. There's tearing, right, and damage to the victim. Sometimes there's overkill, right? And so there's efforts to actually humiliate or demean the victim. So we don't know. And you can also see remorse at a crime scene, right? Where the offender, after they kill the person, they try to make them comfortable, or they try to resuscitate them. Or, these are just some of the things that we would be looking at, those so-called behavioral clues. And we're asking, is this an organized or a disorganized offender? Did he plan this, or is this something that unfolded based on the victim's response? And in my opinion, with the little information that I have, that's where I would be leaning on this case.
Do you think it's possible that this person who broke into Rachel's apartment might have been a career criminal in a sense, or maybe just saw this as, again, that crime of opportunity?
Well, it certainly could be. We don't know what that prior relationship is. As I said earlier, 9 out of 10 murders, there's some relationship. Now we have to also remember this: the relationship is always in the mind of the offender. What does the offender consider the relationship to be? So, is this someone that maybe had previously approached her in her parking lot, or maybe had made some type of sexual advance to her, or some type of flirting? We just don't know. But I will tell you, I would be very surprised if this is just some random act of violence. I think this, and if it was a random act of violence, it's more along the burglary or break-in type of thing. I think there's a very good chance, particularly if there's no forced entry into that residence and there are no signs of a struggle, then this is perhaps a relationship that went sour.
How important are tipsters going to be in cracking this case as well?
Yeah, so crime stoppers or crime scene tips, they are valuable, but we have to be careful that they don't hijack the investigation. Right? What we want to do is do an evidence-based investigation instead of chase suspects that had nothing to do with it. So we need to focus on the evidence at that scene first.
Right. Well, Joe Kennedy, I really appreciate your time today with us and speaking more about this case. Before we sign you off, is there anything else you would like to add?
Well, I want to say that all cases are solvable, right? And what they need to do from a cold case perspective is just to start over, right? That's what it's going to take. We're starting from ground zero, start going back through all the evidence, all the witness interviews, and see if perhaps a clue was overlooked.
All right, Joe Kennedy, again, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. God bless you.
And a group called Silent Witness is offering up to $7,000 for information in the case. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.